Welcome to the Book Flood Podcast. I am your host, Tom Nixon. My guest this week is Nikki Grimes. New York Times bestselling author Nikki Grimes was inducted into the Black Authors Hall of Fame in 2023. Her honors include the CSK Virginia Hamilton Lifetime Achievement Award, the ALAN Award for Significant Contributions to Young Adult Literature, the Children's Literature Legacy Medal, and the NCTE Award for Excellence in Poetry for Children. Author of the Coretta Scott King Award winner Bronx Masquerade and 5 Coretta Scott King author honors, she won the Prince Honor and Seibert Honor for her memoir, Ordinary Hazards. Her latest titles include Garvey's Choice, the graphic novel, a School Library Journal 2023 Best Book, Lullaby for the King, one of Book Riot's 25 best Christmas books of all time, Glory in the Margins, Sunday Poems, and A Walk in the Woods, recipient of 8 starred reviews and 11 best book listings for 2023, including the New York Times, NPR, and Smithsonian Magazine. Ms. Grimes lives in Corona, California. Welcome, Nikki.
Thank you. So glad to be here.
I am so glad for you to be here, too. It's very exciting. Why don't we start with you giving us a little bit of your career trajectory? How did you get to here? What path did it take?
Oh, that was a long one. I started writing when I was 6, but I knew by the time I was in high school that I wanted to pursue this as a profession. And so I started off by publishing my work in literary journals and magazines and attending workshops where I got to meet wonderful people like Nikki Giovanni, Tony Kepambara, Sonia Sanchez, and Nikki especially kind of took me under her wing. And I was out doing poetry readings on the college circuit and that sort of thing. And then I went to college and um, got a bit distracted. You know, college kind of kept me busy, but I continued to write. And I went off to Tanzania. I minored in African languages, and my Swahili teacher, who I did some translation for, really encouraged me to actually go to Tanzania and do some work there, which I did for a year. Then I came back and got serious about pursuing my career. Worked on my first 2 children's books and didn't plan a third because I really didn't plan a first because I was planning a career in adult literature and God laughed. He had other ideas, clearly. So, but I did those 2 books and then I went to Sweden where I was for 6 years and freelanced a lot while I was there for various magazines that I'd written for before this magazine. I did most of the work for Essence, but I got to a place where after being there for several years, I needed to decide either to get into the Swedish literary market or come home,
Mm,
um, because people were not really comfortable working with somebody so far away. Keep in mind, there was no internet. There was
right.
no home computers. There weren't even faxes unless you went into like a big bank. So none of those things existed at the time, and it made it a little dicey to work that far away. Well, I decided I'd rather be a small fish in a big pond than a big fish in a small one. And I thought if I succeeded at the level I hoped I would back at home, my books would eventually get to Sweden, but not in the reverse. And that was a
True.
good decision. And indeed, my books can now be found there. Um, so that was a good decision. So I came home, moved to California, and for years I thought I was going to do the traditional marriage of teaching and writing. But when I got here, I found I was going to have to get a special permit and I needed to go back to school, get a graduate degree, and all that. And I started doing that. And then I realized, wait, I'm just on a paper chase. And this isn't what I want to do. What I want to do is write books. And the time I'm spending pursuing, this paper, I could be actually writing books. So after a year, I left to work just writing full time and just wrote like a crazy person, book after book after book, until things, started to break open for me. After that point, I was pretty much it was just pretty much a straight trajectory after that. Just, one book after another. It took a while to sort of get a momentum going. So I did the temporary work and freelancing continued with that. And I'm a textile artist. So I was doing a lot of fine art fairs, doing the New York hustle thing of cobbling together an income by doing these different things. And then year after year, as things got more started to move in my career, the books were coming out and I started to be able to do school visits and was being invited to do speaking engagements and that kind of thing. I was able to get down to just writing full time. And so I've been doing that ever since.
You have achieved the dream for so many writers that I don't think people realize how hard that is to make a living as a writer.
Very, very hard. Yeah. Yeah. You need to be nimble and you need to know how to pivot and diversify,
Right.
you know.
So your writing has won so many awards, so many awards. Coretta Scott King, Cybert, you've been a New York Times bestselling author. What is it like to win one of those awards? What has that been like for you?
Well, the first one is always the most exciting. For me, I was really excited when I got a Coretta Scott King honor for Jasmine's Notebook. That was the first big one. And I was especially excited because I started to think I was never going to. And then that happened. I'm like, well, okay, so maybe there is going to be something. The single most exciting after that would have to be the Children's Literary Legacy Award because that honors your entire body of work up to that period in
Right.
time. And it's really special to have all of your work rather than a single title honored. And it says, in effect, that no matter what happens going forward, you have made your mark.
Mm,
And you've made your mark doing the work that you have given your whole heart to.
right.
It's hard to get better than that. And there have been, wonderful awards since then that are definitely meaningful. But that was kind of a landmark for sure.
Mm.
Yeah.
So you talked about living in Tanzania. The other place that you lived, you talked a little bit about was Sweden. Tanzania, I understand the languages. How did you end up in Sweden? Was this a dart thrown at a map or something? Or
No, no. It's funny. When I was in Sweden, I did a radio show once in which I talked with a group of Black women expatriates living there. And one of the questions I asked was what had brought them to Sweden. And the answers were all something like, well, I met Lasse, I met Bosse, I met Eric, you know, and they were all the same. It was a guy. Well, the difference with me is the guy was someone I met in Tanzania, an
oh, funny,
artist who ended up with a grant to the Swedish Royal Academy of Fine Art to work for several years. And that took him to Sweden. And then he invited me to come. He was willing to visit me in the States when I went back home, but I was like, no, 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 I'll come there because I love to travel. And,
right?
kind of any excuse will do. And I went just to kind of explore. Relationship didn't work out, but I stayed for 6 years on my own. Yeah.
Got to be something appealing there. I
I,
just
I
visited Finland last year, and it's a really interesting, fascinating part of the world to visit. It's very different.
very different indeed.
Mm,
Which is, of course, what I like about travel in general is
mm,
finding something different. And I just fell in love with Sweden.
mm.
Um, yeah, I'm still in love with it. Eh,
Do you get back there?
I've only been back once. I'm hoping to get back again, but I have friends that have maintained in all those years.
Nice.
So yeah,
So you hosted programs both in Sweden and in the US. Was that part of your career plan, or that just sort of popped up as an opportunity?
that just happened, and opportunities present themselves, and I jump in with both feet. So
Makes
yeah.
Definitely makes sense. What is your writing process like?
There's no single answer to that question because I write across genres, age groups, and subject matter. But in general, I do whatever research is necessary for the book I want to write. I develop character sketches with backstories and sample dialogue for reference for the main characters of the story in question. I determine the back ends of the story, the time frame in which the story will take place. Now, those bookends may change, but it helps to have them in place because it gives me a solid framework in which to write and even meander, but still stay in focus, where I want the story to go.
Mm.
Then once that's done, I do a nuts and bolts outline for the first 10 pieces. And I put outline in quotes because I'm talking about 2 or 3 sentences that describe basically what's going to happen um, in that chapter or in that poem that I'm working on. And 1 to 10, because number 1 is introduction, number 10 is resolution, and somewhere in between is going to be the story arc. And so I nail down what those are gonna be, just writing in plain prose,
Mm.
um, and until I have that story nailed down, I don't really get into the intricacies of poetry. So prose is what I focus on because the most important thing to me, no matter what the final form of it's going to be, is story. It's all about the narrative, which is why I'm a
Mm.
narrative poet as opposed to a lyrical one.
Mm.
I certainly write lyrically, but I'm always focused on the story. Um, and once I have a rough draft of those 10 pieces, I sketch out transitions between each of them. And so I'm developing the story sort of from the inside. And it gets bigger and bigger and bigger until it's done.
What a great way to describe it.
Yeah. And I know it's done when I'm making changes that are no longer improvements.
Mm. Do you tend to publish with the same publisher or
No, because I'm too prolific. I'd be waiting around forever for books to come out if I did
uh,
that. Also, I determined early on that I would be in a better negotiating position if I had more than one publisher
mm,
so that they know they're not the only game in town. It just puts me in a stronger position to negotiate contracts. But also, I am so productive. There have been years, I think the most I had out one year, I think, was 6 books. And it never would have
wow,
happened with a single publisher. The
sure.
most they would have done in a single year is 2. And so I
Mm.
would have had 4 books just waiting for them to be published. And it works for me because I'm I'm working in different genres and different age groups. So I'm not competing with myself by having that
Mm.
many books out because they're for different markets.
Mm.
They're going to different readers. So I'm not competing with myself there.
I greatly appreciate that you mentioned the negotiations that go on. I don't think people realize that it's a business
It,
like any other business.
it's absolutely a business, and it's important to understand that. And yeah, it's for artists, it's a dirty word, but it's a word that needs to be dealt with and understood and broken down. Yeah. In fact, the last couple of years, I've been working on a book specifically about the children's book business,
Mm.
which is something that's in production right now because it's something that too many artists suffer a lack of understanding and just don't do as well as they could do. Sometimes people get burned out unnecessarily because they don't understand simple things like being able to renegotiate a deadline as opposed to finding yourself buried under a series of
Mm.
deadlines and thinking that you have to do them. I'm like, well, did you ask to change it? And I can't tell you how many times a writer said to me, I can do that, you know,
Mm.
about that and about many other things in the business. I'm like, "Oh, this is crazy." And for years, I kept waiting for someone to teach. I thought, well, an MFA program, surely they're gonna start teaching business. In the art schools, they're gonna start teaching this stuff, right? Not happening.
You would think.
You would think. They're graduating people out into the world who know all about craft and nothing about business.
It's such
Yeah,
a good way to put it.
yeah. So
I've talked with a number of authors over the past year where their work has been directly affected by some of the book banning that has been going on. Has that affected your work at all?
Oh, I've been banned. A lot of my work is being banned. Book banning affects everyone's work. There's amount of hurt and anger and grief to navigate. There's an investment of time spent in fighting the bans, and yeah, they're not fun. But the banning has not affected what I write, nor will it.
Mm,
So I just keep going. But it's a balancing act for sure. So I speak out about it and support librarians as much as I can and teachers, and I do a number of things connected with that, working with Pen America. And yeah, there's no getting away from it for sure.
when is your next book coming out?
In April, Cup of Quiet. I have the first one,
Oh, I'm so excited.
and it's gorgeous.
Nice.
Illustrated by Kathy Ann Johnson, who just is magical. I love this is grandma. She's very hip grandma,
I love that.
very colorful. I love her. And it's all about that special quality of quiet in nature that's really not quiet at all, that has all these sounds. And so this girl is at the home of her grandmother, and she's out in the garden, and her grandmother challenges her to collect the sounds she finds in the garden
Mm.
in a cup, an imaginary cup. And so the child walks around the garden collecting the bees' buzz, the sound of the wind in the trees, and all the kinds of sounds that you would find outside.
Oh, so nice. Look
Yeah.
forward to it. What are you working on now?
Ooh, as usual, I'm working on a variety of projects, always juggling. I'm fine-tuning a new Diamond Daniel chapter book, focusing on a deep-seated fear that Diamond wrestles with and how she faces and eventually comes to conquer that fear. It's something I have to handle delicately though, because I don't want to trigger my readers
Right.
dealing with a fearful topic. And I'm very much aware of that because story has the power to trigger. And so you need to be
Uh,
very, very careful and definitely navigate that kind of subject matter. I'm beginning work on an anthology, which is something new for me.
mm,
And I'm working on a picture book that's a fantastical answer to the question, where do ideas come from? Something authors are asked all the time. So I'm having some fun with that.
nice. You have discussed the challenges of your childhood in a number of places. How did those challenges affect the way you write, affect the books that you produce?
Well, those challenges didn't affect my writing. Those challenges are the reason my writing exists.
Mm,
Because I started writing out of a desperate need to excise the poisonous effects of the traumas that I was dealing with. Writing gave me a healthy place to put my rage, my confusion, my depression, all the dark and difficult emotions those challenges left in their wake. Actually, there are two things that saved my life. One, my faith in God, and my writing, which actually is really kind of the same thing because
mm,
when I think about it, the gift of writing came from him. So they're
amen.
they're definitely, connected. Yeah.
Do you do many presentations at schools, at libraries?
I used to do more. I've cut back on school visits. I still occasionally speak to young readers virtually, or during a library visit or at a book festival presentation. Otherwise, though, I'm not doing school visits. I'm always happy to meet my readers, but my speaking and travel schedules have become increasingly arduous over the years. At my age, I no longer bounce back as quickly as I used to. So I decided, let's pull back. And I also just wanted to have more time to focus on writing. People think when you write full time that you just have all this time to only write, but that's just a small part of what it takes to to do this as a living. There's a lot of self promotion and there's the speaking engagements and webinars and all the presentation work you have to create, due to 4 keynotes and 4 school visits and,
Right.
residencies and all this kind of stuff, and yeah, you find the time really frittered away. You're like, "Where's my time?" So you
Mm.
get really precious about your actual writing time. Yeah.
Is there a book or a series of books from your childhood that still resonates with you?
A Tree Grows in Brooklyn.
Mm.
It was the first book I can remember in which I saw a reflection of my own life. Francie Nolan, the main character, lives in Brooklyn, where I lived for many years. She wrestled with poverty, a broken family, with a parent who is an alcoholic. Check, check, check. So that was the first time I saw any part of myself in the pages of the books that I read. It taught me that I was not all alone in the world. And I wanted to give that experience to other readers, other children like me. It taught me that I could survive what sometimes felt unsurvivable.
Mm.
And that experience shored up my decision to be an author.
What are you reading now?
I've just started it, but Skin and Bones by Renee Watson. And she's
I've
always
heard
a
it's
good
good.
read. She's always a good read. So, yeah.
Mm. Well, I want to thank you, Nikki, for coming on the Book Flood podcast. I greatly appreciate it. For our listeners and watchers out there, please like, subscribe, and share. And again, thank you, Nikki.
Thank you.